Hello everybody and welcome back to another watercolor tutorial. We are going to be exploring three techniques or three different ways to paint cupcakes. So let's jump right in. I just drew out mine ahead of time, but I will show you how to sketch these guys out. The bottom portion doesn't matter too much because cupcake tins are fairly easy to draw. But the top portion, this one is going to be sort of like a creamy icing cupcake. So once you have your cupcake tin, you just want to make sure you're leaving a little bit of space for the actual like cake batter portion. So this is just my muffin tin. I'm gonna go, there we go. You can see this a little bit better. And we're going to basically just be painting really long ovular shapes like so, and we're just going to be stacking them on top of one another. So that's our first one. Our second one's going to be a little bit smaller, but it's going to overlap about half of it. And then our third, and actually before we go on to the third one, you can just erase what's inside your second oval there. Then you can do your third oval. And then just erase what's inside the third oval. And we are going to erase the top because we're going to kind of make this cute little dollop of icing, like so. And that's really easy, so you can just sketch that out for yourself. I actually like how that looks a lot better than my little first drawing here, but that's how you draw this one. So once you have that drawn out on your piece of watercolor paper, we can get right into it. We're going to start from the top of our cupcake. And we're going to paint this portion first. So I am going to make the icing of my first cupcake this really nice bright pink color. So I'm sort of using a magenta here. You can, as always, choose whatever color that suits your needs. Colors don't matter as long as you have a pink. A pink is a pink, in my opinion. But anyways, what we're doing here is we want to be mindful of every single little icing layer that we have, and the bottom is going to be darkened. And this is because we want to make it look like there's a shadow on the bottom. So when you're painting on your little dollop here, make the bottom portion much, much darker than the top portion. We can just fix this with, lifting off the watercolor in a bit. So it doesn't have to be perfect from the first try. You can also just take the pigment off of your brush and use watercolor to spread it towards the top. So we're picking up a lot of pigment on the bottom and just distributing it right on the bottom of our little dollop. I don't know if I'm saying that properly. Because I'm impatient and I don't want to wait for this one to completely dry before moving on, I'm going to skip one layer and do the same thing on the third layer of icing here. So we're going to again pick up our pigment and we're going to try and concentrate that pink icing towards the bottom. Oops. That should not have happened, so I'm going to try and fix that. And we're just bringing it right up until the border of the second icing layer. So again, just adding quite a bit more pigment on the bottom. And now what we have left is our middle icing section and our cake batter part and the cupcake tin. So again, because I'm going to be doing the same thing with the cupcake batter, I'm just going to skip that layer and move on to our cupcake tin. So I'm going to make our cupcake tin a nice brown color. When you're doing the border of your tin or your cupcake cup, just kind of create these little wavy, like a wavy border, because cupcake tins tend to have the little grooves and the teeth at the top, so we just want to show that. We can add a little bit of shadow, some shaded features just at the bottom of the cup to make it look a little bit more 3D. You can even have some darker lines already coming up. Okay, once all of these layers are dry, we can fill in those remaining bits. So we're doing the exact same thing where we're just making the bottom portion a little bit darker. So you can of course add your little cupcake tin highlights, just parallel lines stretching from the top to the bottom. Just make sure that as you get towards the sides, they are angled a little bit and not completely straight. So this one is completely straight because it's right in front of the viewer. But as you move your way to each side, they become a little bit more angled toward the left and the right, depending on which side you're going. So moving on to our second cupcake here, I'm going to show you how to draw it once again. It's very, very easy. Again, the cupcake tin itself doesn't matter too much, just this basic shape with the little teeth for the top of the cup. Again, you want to draw a tiny little divot here, or like oval, for the cupcake batter itself. And then for the icing portion, you're going to be drawing this like really thick dollop. So, and it's going to be kind of divided into two sections. So the first section is going to be the widest, and it's just gonna, it's kind of like a large cloud. Think of it that way. So that's kind of our first section, but you're not going to section it off. You're just going to go in a little bit because the second section is going to be a little bit less, it's going to be a bit narrower. So again, creating like this fluffy little cloud, and then we're going to just finish it off in a little point, a little dollop of icing. There we go. It's just as easy as that. So for the icing portion, which is what we're starting with, you're going to first paint on a very watered down layer of the color of your choosing. I'm choosing a really nice light violet, and you do want to make sure, I want to stress that it does have to be quite light, because we are going to be adding highlights to it, which make it look like icing, and if it's too dark, then those highlights won't show, or the low lights. So just keep that in mind when you're painting this on. Just roughly follow the outline of your little pencil marks. Now, while that is drying, I'm just going to paint on the tin portion again, the cup. So again, just using brown watercolor to fill in our tin. You don't have to use brown, by the way. You're more than welcome to use blue or like whatever color that you want to experiment with. I just want to keep the focus on the icing in this tutorial because tins are quite self-explanatory to paint. They're not too difficult. Whereas the icing, that's kind of like the make or break of the cupcake. Once the icing is dry, we can move on to the next step. You're going to pick up that same color of violet or whatever color that you used. You're just going to slightly darken it by adding more pigment and less water. And we're going to work in two sections. So we have our first little cloud, and then we have our smaller cloud up top here. So working with that first larger cloud, we're just going to be creating these kind of like rounded moon shapes, these wisps, I suppose. And you're just starting with the one that is towards the outside the most. And you want to concentrate that pigment, if you can, towards the inner portion of your little moon shape. That's a little bit too dark, by the way. We don't want it this dark, so I'm going to lift some of that off. And then you're just going to paint the next one right beside it, making sure to leave a very thin gap in between the two of them. And that thin gap is what is going to create that icing look. And you just keep going with your moon shapes. And you can go back and just add those little highlights on the inner portion of each little moon, if you haven't already done so. And now we're going to do the same thing on the top in the same direction. You can add some more highlights on the inner portion of your little moon shapes if you want to really make that portion dramatic, as I'm doing here. Don't forget to fill in the batter portion of your cupcake. Okay, so this last one is extremely easy. It doesn't even need to be traced out. Just make sure that you dry your cupcake tin, grab some pigment, whatever color you want on your paintbrush, and we're just going to be basically painting on this really thick S shape. And the S shape is going to overlap a little bit with each turn. And then we're just going to end off with a little twirl. Like so. And you can go over just some of the rounded bits if you weren't totally happy how they came out. And you can fill in the inner parts with a lighter color, like the same color but a lighter version of it. Or you can just use water and blend those in, but just make sure that you really leave those center portions much lighter because we want those natural highlights to be there so that it actually looks like icing. And honestly, that was the easiest one, and it's probably one of my favorites. The only thing that you have to do, of course, is fill in the cupcake bottom, just like we did with these two. One last thing I thought of, just because I thought this blue cupcake was a little bit plain, you can add some chocolate drizzle coming down from it. So I just mixed brown with black watercolor here, and I drew out for myself a little rough guide of how my chocolate drizzle is going to run down my cupcake, which you're welcome to do as well. And I'm just gonna have a few drops of it coming down. And it doesn't have to cover the entire portion. I just wanted to give this a little bit something, you know, a unique detail since the blue was a little bit too plain. There we go. And that's basically it. If you enjoyed this little cupcake tutorial, don't forget to hit subscribe, like this video, and of course check out some of my previous tutorials.